One of the unique approaches we have with this is to actually go back through those opportunities and look at the activities that actually took place. So we're able to connect to things like the mail server and the calendars and perhaps your phone systems. And we're able to actually understand all of the activities and who we actually engaged with on those deals before they ended up close won or close lost.
Welcome to Revenue Insights. We're joined by revenue leaders from some of the highest growth companies. Together, we explore how they built their revenue teams, the journeys they've been on, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Revenue Insights is brought to you by EBSTA. We're an AI-first revenue intelligence platform designed to help you close more deals, retain more customers, and forecast better. Enjoy the podcast.
We present EBSTA as an AI-first revenue platform, and we really focus on helping businesses to increase the number of reps hitting quota, get them to get more of your team forecasting more accurately, and we get our customers live in 30 days. So that's a bit about us at EBSTA. Jonny Adams is joining us from SBR Consulting. Jonny, perhaps you could introduce yourself and a little bit about SBR.
Absolutely, Guy, and thank you so much for welcoming me into the webinar today. I really do appreciate it, and it's great to spend some time with you. I'm sure over the next number of minutes we'll be able to really chew the fat and have a good conversation around some of the critical points of a revenue engine. My name is Jonny Adams. I'm managing consultant at SBR Consulting. We're a global organization that focuses solely on marketing, sales, and revenue operations. We've worked with over 1,000 organizations in the last 20 years and specialize in 3 core verticals: technology, and that's where obviously we know you from there, Guy, professional services, and also financial services, with our aim of helping organizations hit their revenue acceleration goals.
Yeah, very good. We've been working with SBR now for the last, probably about 3 or 4 years now, where we have common customers that are using our data insights and technology and using Jonny's business from a consulting and change perspective. And it's a great combination, and it's kind of led us to today, really, Jonny. We're very exciting to be launching a new combined solution between us, what we call these revenue acceleration reports.
Absolutely.
So let's jump into this for those that are dialed in. And I know we've got people not just joining the webinar, but also people on LinkedIn as well. So welcome, everybody. In today's webinar, we're going to cover these 3 key areas. We're going to talk a little bit about who actually would benefit from a revenue acceleration report. And then we're going to jump into what exactly a revenue acceleration report includes. And then Jonny's going to go into a bit more detail around specific example insights that we think are going to be useful to give you a flavor of kind of the type of insights that you can get from these types of reports. So let's jump straight in and talk initially about this, who actually needs a revenue acceleration report. Now, Jonny, you and I have been involved with hundreds, if not over 1,000 businesses over the years, looking at the challenges that they face in their go-to-market teams. Now, when we did our 2024 benchmark report, we found, and a lot of people will be familiar with the report, and I'm pleased to say the 2025 report is currently underway. We should be launching it early in the new year. But when we looked at the data, what was really apparent is that over 2/3 of reps are still missing their quota. And that number is it's just not sustainable. We can't continue to work in a world where over 69% of sellers are missing their number. Businesses have spent all of this money on all of this technology and are still finding themselves in a place where 2/3 of their reps are missing quota. The other big insights from this year is that we saw that the delta between the top performing sellers and the rest of the sales team is getting wider and wider. And we entered this year at nearly 9x between those top performers and the rest of our sales teams. And then finally, we can see that more deals are slipping past our anticipated close date than ever before. And so if these are challenges that you're experiencing in your organization, then the revenue acceleration report is a really good example of how we can identify what those challenges are and really get under the skin of them, and give you and working with a company like SBR can really help us to not just identify the challenges, but actually go ahead and work out how to address them.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important part. You know, I love it each year when we see the benchmark report come out, Guy. It's one of those things that sits in that that folder on my desktop that I dip back into, amongst other reports that are shared. Look forward to the 2025 version as well. What is interesting when we think about these three core benchmarks, if you think about many organizations, many businesses don't have access to this data. So first and foremost, it's pretty much gut feel. And sometimes you just want to bury your head in the sand because you don't want to look at the challenge in front of you there. But when you do have that insight, I think the important part is that technology can surface these insights, but actually, do you have the capability in your people and processes then to support some type of smoothing out of these data points? But I suppose that's what we're going to go into in a little bit more detail in a moment. So yeah, great point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the big challenges is actually capturing the data that you need to generate the insights in the first place, and we've got a unique approach to that here at Ebster. We convert that data into the insights that you need, but then again, exactly as Jonny was saying, you do need a change agent involved, and somebody who's been through this exercise many times can help fast track that process. If we try and focus on those challenges, when we think about what's happened in 2024, we've seen almost consistently across the board, go-to-market teams had underperformed materially in 2024. When I look at how companies are going about addressing that challenge, the kind of traditional approach is just the team underperformed. We're going to lay off a load of the underperforming salespeople. We might spend a lot more money on marketing to try and generate lots more leads. And then we're going to hire a load more salespeople and assume that they're all going to be perfect. Now, unfortunately, that rarely works. And it's also very expensive. And the time delay and the impact on the business in going through that process is really quite dramatic. And Jonny, I'm sure you've seen it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And over the last 18 months, there has been a tendency to think about the restructuring because of the macroeconomic challenges and the geopolitical challenges that we've seen. Naturally, there's a tendency to think about that. The other aspect is that is one option, and that has been a playbook for many organizations moving forward, but at the absence of a lot of data that might give us an ability to have intelligent decisions in that space rather than the gut feel, which I know that the other option then therefore is to analyze what went well, what didn't go so well with the data, then to make informed decisions, which I think is important, which we'll go through.
Well, exactly. I think the takeaway for me at the highest level, what you're trying to achieve is consistency across the sales team, and ultimately, if we can truly understand what our top performers are doing at every stage of the sales cycle and make it easy for the B and C players to understand, that drive to win will make them want to replicate that behavior. And what we need to do is explain or show the B and C players what the top performers are doing almost in picture formats, because that's the only way the penny will drop. And if we can take away all of the distractions from those sellers, make it super clear what's expected, and then police that, we can very quickly get everyone performing in the same way consistently across the sales team. And as soon as you achieve that consistency, you'll see an uplift, and the performance of the team will start to step up. And it happens really quickly if you can get the data, the insights in place before the change. So trying to give you a bit more clarity to those that are dialing in as to what a revenue acceleration report includes. In essence, what we're talking about is a health check for the entire go-to-market team. So maybe you're a new commercial leader, and you want to understand what's been going on within the organization, what's working really well, what needs attention, or maybe the team haven't been performing as expected. We're able to analyze exactly what those top performers are doing, not just by looking at what they've manually recorded in the CRM, but actually looking at the data from source. And we'll talk a bit more about the data in a few minutes. And we're trying to understand all of the interactions that have taken place with the customer during the entire life cycle, all the way from top of the funnel through to them signing up as a customer, but also then on beyond into customer success, QBRs, renewals, cross-sells, upsells, and really understanding what the customer lifecycle looks like, what a good customer lifecycle looks like, who we should be engaging with, which personas are important to us at each stage of that cycle, really helps to uncover what works.
And I think, Guy, there's the areas that you absolutely say what's within the report. When we've been working on mutual clients together over the last number of years, I think one of the interesting occasions was where an organization that was a PE-backed firm and the CEO in situ plus the commercial leader was there, and they'd been given a mandate, right, which is, here's your value creation plan. You need to achieve the double-digit growth per year. And when we actually think about a revenue engine and the overlay of a revenue engine, is that car got a really well-built engine that's sitting within there that can continuously go, like a Volkswagen? Is it going to carry on going? Or is it a Ferrari, for instance? We're not too sure at this stage. But when we start to apply these reports into that revenue engine, what we can start to see is some real detailed insights into that. So if you're an individual that's running against a value creation plan, this can give you a laser focus into some of those key performance indicators that can help you drive that towards those particular goals.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And one of the things that we do is we have to look at all the opportunities that closed won and lost in the last year to be able to do the benchmarking in the report. The challenges that a lot of organizations had is that the data that associated to those deals was never put into Salesforce in the first place or into their CRM. And so one of the unique approaches we have with this is to actually go back through those opportunities and look at the activities that actually took place. So we're able to connect to things like the mail server and the calendars and perhaps your phone systems. And we're able to actually understand all of the activities and who we actually engaged with on those deals before they ended up close won or close lost. So when you look at Salesforce today, you might see one contact with 3 emails associated to an opportunity. When we go back through all of the activity, we might find that actually there was a buying committee of 9 stakeholders, and there were actually 250 interactions that took place before we achieved that outcome. And it's that approach, by fixing that data, that then puts us in a unique place to be able to actually build those benchmarks and understand the insights that are of what's been going well within our opportunities and what needs attention. So within a revenue acceleration report, to create one, we connect to up to 3 different data sources. The first is your CRM, the likes of Salesforce or HubSpot are the usual suspects. We're then connecting to things like your mailboxes, so your calendars and email, and we can connect to mailboxes of people that have recently left the business, perhaps people that don't even use Salesforce but are interacting with the customers. And then finally, you might be using a call recording tool where we can access the call recordings, and our AI is able to do the analysis of what's actually going on those calls, who's interacting, what kind of qualification is being done, what questions are we asking, what competitors are being raised, what objections are coming up on the calls. So when we connect to those data sources, we're able to go back through the last year's worth of traffic, and we're able to deliver all of the insights you can see listed here. Now, we're not going to have time to go through all of them today, but we've picked out 2 areas that we're going to dive into deeper. But if anyone wants to see more of the insights around any of these specific areas, then again, just reach out and we can give you a bit more clarity on or deep dive into any of these areas in advance. Okay, so Jonny, I know you've done some work here, giving the team some examples of some of the insights that we capture and kind of how you how you interpret those insights. So perhaps we can start with the funnel analytics.
Yeah, absolutely. And very much where we work with Ebster, we are the professional service wraparound. And I kind of liken it to, you're going to have a rich data source of this report that's presented to you. And whoever is lucky enough who's put their details in there to receive the report, which is complimentary, we'll look at that. And then there's always the so what. And I guess where SBR and Ebster work together is that Ebster are pulling out and teasing out the fact, and SBR are doing the answering of the so what and helping. And when we look at this particular piece of information that will be presented in the report, there are some fascinating insights. And actually, when you go into this, it's a bit like one of your favorite films. You go and watch it once, you love it, and then you do a little bit of sort of, oh, that was great. And then you go and watch it again. You go, oh, there was something that I didn't see the first time, and now I'm seeing it again. So this is a bit like this page. So within the time we've got, Guy, I'll pick out maybe 2 or 3 key things. I mean, firstly, this is representative of an organization, an average organization. So this may or may not, be relevant to your situation if you're listening to this. But ultimately, there are some key things that could relate back to you. And ultimately, if you look from left to right, when you start to look at qualification and discovery, there's an element around the size in terms of the running days that's currently going on in qualification and discovery. And you might have remembered that film, Guy. I talk about films clearly at the time, about Glengarry Glen Ross, which is the old classic ABC. And what does that stand for, Guy? ABC?
Always be closing.
So I always say, look, kick that out the window. That's completely wrong, right? It's ABQ, because it's always be qualifying, right? So my question back to this business would be, to what extent are you actually really working with the team to qualify deeply to enable actually the moves over to the exit criteria through stages is deeply actually working through that funnel. And importantly, as you see towards the back end, actually pre-approval to approval, our win-loss rate is too poor, right? So therefore, actually what's happening at the early stages that might impact the later stages. So I would be looking at this going, how well are we qualifying early stage opportunities, and how well are we qualifying throughout the funnel, which is one of many aspects that you might like to focus on.
This is actually, I mean, we've obviously taken the details of the company off of this, but this is from a live customer, and there's some obvious kind of anomalies within the data. We would expect a waterfall effect, but it's crazy to see here that we've got the number of deals that are in qualification and discovery, for example, that are green, that should have progressed to the next stage. The number of opportunities that entered that next stage is not the same as that green line. So deals are being jumping stages all over the place here. And I think that's, one of the obvious wins here is going to be around the entry and exit criteria that they set around the stage progression, and making sure that that's being policed a lot more accurately than they're doing it at the moment.
And that's where I go back to it's like a bit like the Pandora's box. You open it and it's more and more. So, everyone's looking at this piece of information here. To what extent is the demo stage actually functioning correctly? I mean, we might want to challenge that in terms of, are you comfortable with a 60-day cycle at that stage? Is that appropriate for this organization? There are a couple of other aspects I think that's interesting, Guy, that the data would promote the hypothesis. And the hypothesis would be around, to what extent is marketing aligned with sales to produce the right ideal client profile and value proposition? And my challenge to this business would be, how well aligned is marketing, product and sales, and actually functioning fully within this org? And that would be an interesting area to investigate as well. And also I'd be checking into your point, is there a clear mandated playbook that sits within this sales process? So if you think about people, process and alignment, actually, I think there's a couple of other questions that you could ask from this data that we can see here. So it's fascinating. I know we've got many more pages to look at, but there's just a couple of points that have been shared there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, look, the headlines for me is that I don't mind if we lose a load of opportunities in those early stages. I really do mind if, after we've invested all that time and energy, we're still losing so many deals at these later stages. And how the hell have we got more deals in entering negotiation than we do in the earlier stage? We've got deals literally just jumping straight into stage 4 of the sales cycle. And I think, as you rightly said, Jonny, if there was more qualification going on in these early stages, we would see nowhere near as much red in the later stages, especially down here. It's crazy that we're still losing, nearly half of the deals that are in approval stage. Things happen, but it shouldn't happen that consistently. So really understanding what's going on under the skin of these stages and the progression and the gates and triggers is absolutely key. And we're going to find that information as we go.
We'll return to the episode in a moment. This podcast is brought to you by EBSTA. Every year, we produce the B2B Sales Benchmarks Report. It provides insights from the analysis of billions of revenue dollars, revealing what attributes drive top sales performance and highlighting where time and money are wasted. To get early access to this year's Benchmarks Report, sign up for our newsletter at ebsta.com/newsletter. Now, back to Revenue Insights.
We did another piece of analysis. Again, this is from a live customer, where we were looking at what proportion of opportunities are going through every stage through the progression, as you'd expect. And Jonny, you can see from the numbers here, this isn't unusual when we go into an organization, that the type of the lack of discipline that's going on in the stage progression. And it's so low-hanging fruit for businesses, right? They haven't got to, there's so much opportunity here to affect change. If you can just get them, if the stages are wrong, let's make a change to the stages. But if we've got stages in place, keeping them and having the discipline to stick to them is going to be absolutely key.
Absolutely. And it's hard, being a sales consultancy, looking at this and thinking, gosh, I just really want to take a step back and hypothesize a few problem statements here, which is essentially what we do when we look at this data. And Mike Slater references a quick question, which is, how do you know poor win rate is due to poor ICP match? Well, the point being here is that this data is for you to review and hypothesize. So one of the questions would be, when was the last time I spoke to marketing and actually challenged the ICP? When was the last time I looked at my sales strategy and identified my next 5-year plan and identified, is the current ICP going to enable us to achieve that growth element? That would just be one hypothesis that we're looking at here. Does that equal poor win rates? I think that's just a question to be had and to be answered throughout the analysis of the team, of the people, process, and through the data. But when we start to look at stage jumps, if we want to call it that, where we go back or go forward, initially when we think about stage jumping, there's probably some rigor that's missing within the actual sales process. And therefore, the question might not be sitting in the sales performer in terms of the individual contributor. Maybe the question comes back to the leadership. And is the leadership built enough rigor within the organization? Is there enough spans and layers within your leadership function that's enabling thorough pipeline reviews? That actually, another question could be, is the sales process actually fit for purpose, or people are actually skipping stages because it doesn't feel relevant because the market has adjusted? But ultimately underneath, we've got a question is, are individuals at the individual contributor level qualifying appropriately? Or actually, are they having to go back because they're not qualifying appropriately and deals are slipping? And actually, is the hygiene in the system appropriate? And yesterday, we were delivering a compensation plan redesign for an organization. And we're actually going to be putting in an individual element into that compensation plan, which is all about Salesforce hygiene. So to what extent is this poor Salesforce hygiene? Again, it is another hypothesis that we want to look at. But Guy, have you got any sort of perspectives on the data that you see in front of you?
What's astounding is how quickly you can affect change once you understand these challenges. And I think a stage progression, gates and triggers being much more diligent, knowing, for example, that until we've got buy-in from a specific C-level stakeholder, we're not going to leave discovery. Until we know that there's a budget, until we know that there's a critical event, we're not going to leave a certain stage in the sales process. And for us in our organization, we insist that the individual contributors have got at least 3 stakeholders bought in, and we have specific personas, VP of sales or above, CRO, for example. It has to be one of them. And the other thing that's become really interesting in the data when we looked at it was how important the finance persona is. And that's changed in the last 12 months. So if you haven't looked at your stage progressions, if you haven't dived into the gates and triggers in a while, reviewing what your top performers have done consistently and who they're engaging with at each stage of the sales cycle to achieve the best outcomes of your team really will give you a fresh perspective as to whether those gates and triggers are still as appropriate as they were when you originally put them in place.
And it's interesting just before we move on, but you talk about gold standard and that sounds like gold standard. There's be some great tips that people are taking away. The CFO playing an integral role because people are scrutinizing spend, specifically in the tech industry, as you described, but actually in professional services, knowing the CFO is a really important part, for where we work a lot of the time as well. I was talking to an individual today that worked at one of the most successful businesses in the last decade, a company called Google. And they talked about when they were recruited as one of the partner leads in terms of that organization, they had a 6-week sales school irrelevant of the role that you took. The point being is they knew the process inside out. And I think potentially at this insight around here, 66% of deals are not adhering to the process. Maybe the question is enablement in this function as well. To what extent is the enablement team set up for success to help the team out? Possibly.
Yeah. But the good news is that once you start showing the B and C players how to do this stuff, they all want to follow suit. They all want to be a top performer. And I genuinely believe that you can bring your B and C players up to top performing status if you give them the insights, if you give them the process to follow and the playbooks to win. They've got a much better chance of winning than just and it's a whole lot cheaper than ripping them out and replacing them with new resources.
True.
So this is one of my favorites. What we're looking at here is some real seller performance. I've obviously taken the names of the AEs out to protect the innocent. But we're looking at a team of 6 sellers and the impact of time on their win rates. So at the top here, we've got a graphic that shows us in this case, there's 5 stages of their sales process. And if we take this second AE here, we can see that they've got a 64% conversion rate out of stage 2. Well, that's not too bad. And on average, they're spending 52 days in stage. But when we look at the data, what we find is that when this specific AE wins a deal, when they won a deal, they're only spending 22 days in the second stage of the sales cycle. And we all know that time kills all deals. but really having that granularity of understanding of how much time kills your deals, and at which point should you as a leader be talking to your individual contributors about moving that deal on or closing it off as lost. And in this case, after 22 days, we need to start having that conversation. But if we don't have that information at our fingertips, well, the AE will tell us all the stories in the world as to why they should keep that deal in their pipeline, because they don't want to have too little coverage. And talking of coverage, another great stat, one of the data points I really enjoy is understanding the level of coverage each rep needs to hit their quota, because it can be wildly different within an organization. And sometimes we can beat up the top performers because they haven't got quite enough coverage, but in fact, they've got more than enough to hit their number, while the underperformers might need a whole lot more than they've currently got. And it's a great data point to keep an eye on, because if it's moving down, then you're winning, right? That you want the top performer, the sellers should be getting better. They should need less coverage as time goes on to hit their number.
It's really interesting you reference, and thank you for articulating this slide, because it looks heavy in terms of numbers, but when you cut through it with your explanation there, I think it's beautiful. The really pithy points that you've got to, which is time in stage and what that means to win rates. We get an awful lot of requests from organizations for a time-based analysis on their sales team at the moment, and we're hearing a lot in market that CEOs are asking their sales functions to optimize through AI. I mean, let's not even get into that, because it's a real burden on commercial leaders at the moment. But the point being is, when we think about sales professionals, they believe they typically do twice as much selling as they actually do. There's lots of research to suggest that. But actually, if you think about actually how much do they need to be in market selling in a given time, this data could really help you build your target operating model, understand your spans and layers. It could help you actually, to your point, have the right appropriate pipeline reviews at the right time to ensure that the velocity continues. Just those data points about that time in stage is so valuable. And to your point, and I think this is one of the biggest things that's coming out of the markets that we're working in, is forecast accuracy, right? To what extent is, once you go over those stage numbers in terms of the timeline, actually the accuracy of that, the opportunity of it actually landing is going to reduce, and therefore actually refining your forecast accuracy is going to be so important. A client of ours, Guy, last year actually changed out all of their regional sales leads for missing forecast. And that's such an important part for business leaders alike to achieve. So some really rich data and some really rich insights. Thanks for sharing.
I think the challenge that companies have when it comes to accurate forecasting is I now remember my story. We went into a business where they had their time, the impact they had, the time had on win rates was dramatic. And after it got over 100 days, the win rates just fell off a cliff. Now, they had over 120 deals that were over 300 days old, where historically the win rate was less than 2%. But because no one had done the analysis, they were still holding on to these deals in hope rather than expectation. Mm-hmm. So understand the impact of time on your win rates, because it has a big impact, and know where you should close those deals off as lost, because there's so much inefficiencies in sales. And I think, we're spending 80% of our time on deals that never close one. So let's really understand that and do the best we can to either help the reps to course correct earlier, or actually jump into and help them to close those deals off as lost, so they can move on to something more productive.
Yeah, I agree. We love our yeses, we like our nos, but the maybes will kill us, right? And it's just, I think we're coming out with cliche bingo going on here. But the point being is, it's so true, and I know this data and these insights here, Guy, that you're about to sort of give a high level overview is so valuable too.
Yeah, so as one of the things that you'll get as part of the report is a leaderboard of how your AEs are performing. And some of this stuff that you'll have on the left-hand side here, you'll already know. You'll know what the win rates are. You probably have worked out a velocity of dollars per day for each rep. You'll definitely know how much ARR you've won, and average sales cycles. But actually, the real challenge is understanding some of the other data points here. So if we look here, the lower performers, they're not engaging with enough stakeholders. They're not as multi-threaded as they need to be. And one of the cornerstone data points we'll give you is an engagement score. We'll tell you how much momentum you need with different personas at each stage of the sales cycle to maximize your chance of winning. And we can see here that these lowest performers, guess what? They're also the ones engaging at the lowest level. And they also seem to be engaging with the wrong personas. And from the analysis we did on their call recordings, we can see that their level of qualification is very, very low. Even if they've not completed it in the system of record, we can still find it from the call recordings. And we can see that it's not surprising that the ones that are doing the least amount of qualification are the ones that are billing the least amount of revenue.
Yeah, great. I know. Great science.
Do you want to talk about the top performers here, Jonny?
Yeah, absolutely. I think really important part is when we think about A players, B players, and C players, we've talked about you have a couple of options. We can either work on the current team or we can rip out and start again. There's always going to be a need to defend against regrettable turnover or attrition and actually think about succession planning. Yeah. So high level people strategy, to what extent are you working with your FTE really focused around bringing in the right team to actually do well? Now, we know that really successful leaders coach and manage really well, right? That's one of the things. What typically happens though is with A players, what we typically do with our A players is actually we don't spend enough time with them and we actually focus on the B's and the C's because they're the ones who suck up time, and the A players are left on their own, neglected, and actually what starts to happen is they might move into a B player. So really good analysis in front of us is who are our A players through the data that we can see. From that, what we can then start to do as leaders, we can start to replicate top performance. And as you can start to see, for example, some of the data here is that top performers have an average of 8 to 9, 7, 8 or 9 average relationships. And Guy referenced the importance there. So it might not be about the fact that some of your B and C players don't want to do it. It might not be a will thing. It might be a skill thing. Do they know the buyer persona? Do they know what are the needs? What are the motivations? What are some of the psychographics and demographics of those individuals? And are they able to ask the right questions to get some referrals into those? I don't know, but good question. The other aspect would be is those top personas. Do they think and talk and walk like a CTO? I once worked with a leading HR platform that's based out the DACH region. They're selling HR platforms. So their ICP and their personas are HR, directors, etc. When was the last time that you looked at a HR magazine? Never. When was the last time you did a HR course? Never. So if your CTO is some of the top, most important buyer personas, then how do you walk and talk like a CTO? Go to a networking event, but elevate yourself away from not just the people you like to talk to, but actually the people that you need to talk to. And this data helps us do that. And I love your point around, and I said it earlier, ABQ, always be qualifying, right? That call analytics that gives us an indication in terms of qualification is the heart of everything we do. We shouldn't just have it as one stage in the sales process. It should live throughout our methodology and our process. A players clearly have a high tendency to qualify throughout the whole process, and therefore we should be applauding that. And potentially that input might be remunerated in certain ways or incentivized in certain ways. And what a great way of breeding great behaviors as inputs as well. So a really nice set of data. Guy, have you got anything from your side around A players and what this means in terms of this data?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, what's really pleasant about the data that we've seen is that once you've understood which personas you should be engaging with, or which personas the top performers are consistently engaging with at each stage of the sales cycle, and how much engagement is required before they progress on to the next step, and how well they qualify at each stage, and what information they're gathering, and what objections are being raised. And again, because the AI is doing it, you're not relying on what the reps are logging into the system manually. You're able to capture this data in a much more consistent format. And when you show this to the rest of the sales team, suddenly, the A players love it because you're making a big deal about how well that they're performing. And you're showing the rest of the sales team, look, if you want to earn the same kind of commissions that these guys are earning, if you want to win as much as them, this is the playbook. This is how they're winning. And when you break it down into individual stages and individual actions and activities, and showing them how the qualification is different, they're qualifying so much better than you are, then suddenly they want to jump on and learn how to do that exercise. And again, if you take away the distraction of having to do any admin around it, well, if I do loads of qualifying, then I've got to start recording it all in the system manually. No, not anymore. AI can do all of that in a much more consistent way, so that every single call is analyzed, not individually, but across the entire sales cycle. So you suddenly get a complete picture of how well we captured the information we need to, what objections were raised, what competitors have come up, And all of that data, suddenly you can now report on, over time, is a certain competitor getting mentioned more or less? Over time, are certain objections getting raised more or less? And by knowing that, we can start to train the sales team as to how to deal with those objections or deal with those competitors. So all of this is information that's in your business. You just haven't surfaced it in the right way. Okay, well, thank you all for joining us today. The insights we covered today really only covers two key areas, the funnel analytics and the seller's performance. There's a whole host of other analytics and insights that come as part of the revenue acceleration report. And again, if anyone wants to see any of that in any more detail, do reach out. Jonny, anything I've missed or anything else you want to highlight?
No, just the next webinar, make sure that I change my picture. Clearly, I've changed my facial hair. I look much younger there. But Guy, as always, it's been great to talk to you. And I think there's a lot to go at. It's one of those things. My closing remarks would be, we've gone through this in 30 minutes. The great thing about commercial growth is about you just take a time to step back. We're coming up to Christmas and New Year. Most people do dial down a little bit. If one had this data in front of them, they probably need a buddy, a coach. They need to have ability just to play out some sort of themes that they can then test and learn over a period of time. And it's got some length to it. Exactly. So it's not about just having a week's worth of work. This will really take 12 months to really start changing some of this data. So yeah, thanks for your time today. Really do appreciate it.
Excellent. Yeah, look, the reports are normally delivered within about 7 days of connecting to the platform. And then Jonny will be booking in some time to take you through your content. I hope you found today useful. Do reach out and connect with either Jonny and I on LinkedIn. And you've got our email addresses here as well. So we look forward to connecting with you all, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Thanks for listening to Revenue Insights from EBSTA. If you want to learn more from some of the brightest minds on how to predictably and efficiently grow revenue, then subscribe to our newsletter. We'll deliver actionable insights straight to your inbox. Go to ebsta.com/newsletter. See you soon.